بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our third podcast called In Context. And for today's topic, we're going to talk about the current event of the airstrikes of Israel on Iran. And without further, I'd like to hear Ihab's perspective and what I have seen transpire last night in the airstrikes.
Okay, so Israel says that it launched attacks through the Syrian and Iraqi airspace, that it attacked Syrian and Iraqi air defenses to protect its planes. It attacked Iranian air defenses. It attacked Iranian missile bases and Iranian factories of missiles and drones. Iran says that there has been attacks on military facilities in 3 provinces, that it damaged some radar installations, killed 4 soldiers. Otherwise, the damage was minor, and that air defenses were able to limit the damage. International media report that there were sounds of explosions in Tehran and close to the airport, which is where you would expect to have air defense facilities. The U.S. confirms that the attacks were on military sites and warns Iran not to respond. Israel very clearly said that it limited its attacks to military sites and military-related sites. Iran seems to agree, but it asserts that the attacks were limited. That's the summary of the event. Now, we might start looking at understanding the relevance of the event and what it means. And I'd say the first thing is we'd want to evaluate the claims, although there are not much difference in the claims, but we might want to start evaluating them. So let's turn this over.
I think that evaluating these claims, we have to, as we were discussing before, sort of separate like what actually happened from what the story is everybody wants to tell. None of us know exactly what happened, okay? And that's probably not going to come out for some time. You know, whenever a military installation is hit, that's always sort of kept secret for security reasons. So none of us should pretend to know exactly what damage was done with any definitive confidence at this point. But what matters for us is the story that's being told. Most specifically, the story that's coming out from the Iranian side. Because the ball is now in Iran's court as to what happens next. And within almost minutes of the first wave of attacks being launched, Iranian media was already starting to downplay the significance of the attacks, highlighting that most of the things that were launched were intercepted, that the damage was limited. There was a lot of videos of Tehran and other cities showing normalness, right? This was the recurring theme throughout all the videos I saw, was this effort to portray things are just as normal. And that's very important because that gives an off-ramp to the regime and perhaps even Israel to sort of de-escalate for the time being. Now, I don't believe that de-escalation is going to be permanent. I don't think we've reached a long-term peace here. But I think that at least for the immediate short-term future, this might put an end to the tit-for-tat kind of attacks we're seeing. I think Biden and his administration really wanted to avoid a massive war before an election because that would obviously benefit Trump. I know Netanyahu is not a fan of Biden and would prefer Trump, but at the same time, I think he probably also might have calculated that it doesn't want to be too obvious that he's trying to push or shift an American election. And I don't think Israel's ready for all-out war. I think that they just suffer. And I think what's going on with the Lebanon example, they're really struggling. I heard that they were even retreating, ending the ground offensive in southern Lebanon, which indicates that they're having some problems. They're not just marching into territories and conquering. So I don't think they want to start a massive war with a country that is way larger and would pose even more problems than what they're facing in southern Lebanon. So I think for the time being, the stories being pushed by official state narratives indicate that we might see a reduction in tensions. And that's my take on what happened last night.
So first, when the Israelis attacked air defense installations in Syria and Iraq, this was really uncalled for, meaning air defenses in Iraq were not going to shoot at Iran. In fact, the installation they hit was in northern Iraq, and it's not always why would they hit it. The last time when they attacked Iran, they were attacking through a path much farther south. This was either show off or a specific message. In Syria, it was just pure show off. So there's an element of show off here. On the other hand, the Israelis were very particular that we were limited to military installations. I think this is an Israeli appreciation of Iran's limits of its attacks on Israel to military installations. So this is the Israeli government recognizing that it's soft, that Hezbollah can cause serious damage, that Iran is limiting Hezbollah's attack even after it allowed them to expand in the last 2 weeks to less harmful targets than it could. This is Israel saying we don't want to escalate this with Iran because it could be damaging. We'd like to keep bombing Lebanon at will without them bombing us at will. Now, another point about the elections. The Biden administration made big claims that we managed to contain Israel. I don't buy them. Israel did not start attacking Lebanon until elections was in serious going. They didn't wait for the last 3 months, just haphazardly. They waited because they wanted to do this now, while elections are going on. The reason they would want to do this is, per standard politics, is if the U.S. is busy with elections, it has to be careful on what it says and does, because that can have very important implications on their elections. So the U.S. is rather careful around election times. To Israel, this is good because it means that they can actually achieve political ends to their liking, not to the U.S. liking, which is not exactly the same thing. So the fact that they held it until now and started now tells you that Israel has its own whatever it's called. Okay. On the other hand, the fact that they are not expanding the war tells you that what they are doing in Lebanon is not going well. So they can't expand further. They are not even looking to expand further in Lebanon. In fact, attacking Iran now gives away card that they could have used in Lebanon. Because one reason I think that Hezbollah has not been expanding in their attacks is because Iran is keeping that card in reserve in case Israel attacks them in ways that forces them to respond, so they could use this expansion of Hezbollah's response as a card. So I think what this says is it looks like Israel is giving away the prospect of expanding its attack on Lebanon beyond Litani. That's my assessment. I don't buy the U.S. claim that it managed and succeeded in limiting Israel. Well, they didn't try even to limit their attack in Lebanon. And that is what brought this in. Because Iran actually sustained very serious damage when Israel attacked Lebanon. This is one important asset that has been damaged seriously. And the U.S. saw this coming and they didn't mind. They don't mind. The fact that Israel is not expanding the war and is trying to limit it is because they do not have the resources and they do not see a potential to achieve a political gain by expanding their war. Right now, they don't seem to be able even to break beyond the border villages. But I'm saying, even if that ever happens, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere beyond Litani. So this is essentially Israel admitting that actually there is limited scope. Now, it is true that if Trump takes over, which is Joseph's point, things might change. I don't think there are strategic differences between Biden and Trump. There are style differences, not strategic differences. I'd like to hear Joseph's actually take on this, but let me put my take first. So the difference, in my opinion, is Biden is an establishment or machine creature. Machine creatures are programmed to take care of strategic interests of the machine, the establishment, the government, the U.S. government. And in return, the machine takes care of them after retirement with all kinds of things. Trump, on the other hand, is, as Stephen Walt calls him, a gifted con artist. He is in this to make money for himself and look beautiful. So he is willing to let crumbs fall even out of the things that the machine considers prized. However, that doesn't mean the machine doesn't exist. That doesn't mean that it can give away serious strategic interests. It means that things that the machine would consider small crumbs, he doesn't care to give them away to personal gain out there. To the Israelis, that looks like big things. But that's because there is a difference between, in animal literature, there is a difference between the lion or the tiger and the hyena. So the hyenas come and eat the scraps that the lion or tiger leaves. And essentially, Trump is willing to leave more scraps on the corpse than Biden.
Yeah, I think the point that yes, both Biden, Trump, Harris all have like a similar the machine. I think they all sort of operate within the framework of the machine to some extent. While Trump might be able to sort of do things that might at times go against the will of the machine, in the end, they still are following basically the same overall policy, even if the framing is different. However, I still think Trump potentially is more dangerous. I mean, obviously, it couldn't be much worse than what's going on currently, but at least it sounds like the Biden-Harris people are not approving of like full-blown annexation of Gaza and building condominiums on the beach. Like, not whether that actually happens is to be seen. But at least they're not openly sort of endorsing that. Where, as you made the point, Trump is a con artist about making money, and I could see him having a much worse day after plan, let's put it that way, than Harris. Though the plan in the midst of the conflict, I think, is pretty similar. I think Trump might be a little bit more apprehensive to use U.S. military to help Israel because there is a pretty strong movement within his MAGA movement about American isolationism and, quite honestly, a real strand of genuine anti-Semitism there. Like, beyond anti-Zionism, it's like straight up just not liking Jews because of their Jews. And I think Trump will consider that a little bit when deploying U.S. military assets in defense of Israel. But, yeah, I think when we're looking at the long term, I don't see how long-term strategy with Trump would be any way better than Biden-Harris. Because, as you said, Trump is about maximizing whatever financial gain he can get. And we all know that the Israelis and their wealth offer him more to work with than whatever the people of Gaza can offer him, which is virtually nothing.
The idea that Trump would allow the Israelis to eject people from Gaza or the West Bank, I don't think so, because this is a major strategic interest of the machine. It's not a scrap. And it's a strategic interest not because they like them, but because they are afraid that will destabilize their colonies in Egypt and Jordan and Iraq. That's the reason. Because if they allow Israel to do this in Gaza today, tomorrow they do it in the West Bank. Because the West Bank is much more valuable to the Israelis than Gaza. And that will bring down the English monarchy in Jordan, right there. So...
right, but I don't think... What I'm talking about here isn't a mass, like, Holocaust-level expulsion of everybody in Gaza in one. It'd be a slow process that you wouldn't be able to directly see.
That has been going on for the last 50 years. And the U.S. doesn't mind it. The U.S. actually doesn't object to it. When the U.S. talks about two-state solution, it's not serious. It's just a slogan to put the kids to sleep, to maintain the status quo so over the long term, Israel can digest its booty. The problem is that the hyena is too excited.
We both agree that rhetoric does matter because rhetoric sets precedents, it sets limits, it sets boundaries. So when Trump operates with a more belligerent rhetoric, a more do what you got to do kind of rhetoric, that's a good point. That's a good point. That does give more room.
Yes, the loose rhetoric that Trump uses to aggrandize himself gives the Israelis more leeway to do what they want. You are right. But what I'm saying is this is around the margins or what he considers scraps. But this point is quite valid and it shouldn't be minimized. The loose rhetoric that Trump uses, and actually it cuts across the board, not just in Israel, in the Middle East, it's also in Russia and Ukraine and China. His loose rhetoric is harmful to the empire. It's good for self-aggrandizement, but that's again the way the process works. He's looking for himself. And he's looking for himself now, not for rewards from the machine after he leaves office like the good apparatchik would do.
I think another thing we should think about with the Trump administration is the people he would put in these high-level defense secretary positions. People like Mike Pompeo. When you have people like Pompeo who genuinely don't value the lives of Muslims at a deep, fundamental level, these people, he sees people that are Muslims as apostates, they're evil, they're bad. Like, this is the way these people think. I grew up in an area with a lot of evangelical Christians. It's not about, it's something deep. It's like you're a flawed human being if you're Muslim. Yes, that is something that does, I think, go into the calculus about tactics. How many lives are we willing to,
do you think
collateral damage level becomes more tolerable, higher when you have someone like Pompeo?
Do you think Blinken sees them any differently?
No.
The rationale might be different, but no. Meaning, in Blinken's eyes, well, you are worthless because I can make money of you. In Pompeo's eyes, you are worthless because I hate you and I can make money of you.
But the difference is, again, and I bring this up in my classes, Blinken still has to answer to the accusations of being hypocritical and going against the tenets of international law and liberalism. And even if that's a very thin veneer of order, that's still something. Because someone like Pompeo, I reject this outright. So your argument,
it's an overhead. I agree. It's an overhead.
It's a little bit of a restraint.
It's an overhead. He has to. There is an overhead.
Yeah. So, like, when you're completely unrestrained by the bounds of international law because you don't recognize it, you see it as a violation of your religious freedom or whatever, that makes you pretty much unaccountable. Like, there's no way to rein you in. And Blinken, as bad as he has been, at least in theory, you can use this guilting rhetoric of liberalism and violating liberal values to at least potentially bring something. I don't know. This is we see not much evidence that this worked thus far. But what do you use to bring Pompeo in? Like, what kind of argument?
Did you see Blinken in his press conference with Hamad Abdurrahman in Qatar? I saw something, and he was challenged head on, and well, it's not happening. There is a massacre. No, it's not happening. Actually, Netanyahu assured me it's not happening. There is an overhead. He has to make this song and dance. Agreed. Okay, but he's making this song and dance because he's calculating, well, he's going to retire, and once he retires, someone could come and make legal trouble for him, so he has to protect his legal back. And I agree. Actually, there is more important international context here. The Western international colonial order has established new norms by allowing massacre to continue publicly for 13 months. They'd like this not to count as a precedent in the international order. And that's why they keep things happening. Because they would not like it to be established and used against them.
No, I think this is the biggest takeaway from all of this, is that an entirely new precedent of mass civilian casualties has been set. It's okay for certain people to be killed in mass, including women and children, and it's just a part of collateral damage. I don't think, once again, but think deep about it, though. Like, the United States was already doing this in Iraq in 2006, right? So this isn't the first time that mass civilian casualties were.
But it was not public. It was not acknowledged. The U.S. denied it was happening at all times, and it was always done in the dark of night. So when they bombed the hospital overnight in Afghanistan, they denied it was a hospital. They kept investigating it for several months before admitting it was a hospital.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Okay,
but Israel hasn't left a hospital in Gaza without destroying it.
Okay, I think here let's frame it like this then. Since 2006, at least, the acceptance of mass casualties of civilians and was acceptable on a quiet level, but now we've come towards open. It's okay.
Well, not only quiet level, but also in a quick, short time span.
So to come back to the context of the event the event we're trying to put in context, what I think we're seeing is a change in the international political order in which it's taking more traditional colonial tone, where the idea of equality of nation states is not true. There are one set of rules that is publicly acknowledged to apply to master race nation states, and there is another set of rules that is that applies to lower races. And that's actually what's at work here between Iran and Israel. So Israel is saying, well, you can attack our military installations, we can attack your military installations, but you should not let your guys in Lebanon respond to our civilians when we kill their civilians. And that's what is being settled in this discussion here.
So I want to ask a question.
We can bomb the daylights out of Beirut, and you don't get to do anything in Tel Aviv.
Usually, when attacks like this happen, at least I guess we're putting this in context. The general public aura would be that it's like a big deal. Like what happened last night, people would go crazy. But why do you think now, even in generally, they're saying we only did this? Like usually that would be kept secret, that we only bombed this site or we did this. Usually they'll make it seem like it's a big deal what they did in Iran, and the people in the world will react and go crazy and so forth. But people are even now expecting that, hey, they're doing this as a buddy kind of thing, and it's no longer hidden like it was before. Like, why do you think the U.S. would allow this for the public rhetoric to like say, hey, you know what's happening in Iran is no big deal?
Well, I think social media has a lot to do with those. The way so many people can take pictures and verify and show things, it causes, I think it necessitates a more careful, coordinated response to avoid things getting really out of control, right? And I think that in a weird way, social media almost, states can obviously still lie and make up stories about what happened, but it's not as easy as it was 100 years ago. Everyone's got a camera. Everyone can say, look, there's no fires here in Tehran. What are you talking about? Or they can say, look, there is a fire and it's massive and it's an apartment complex that's burning down. So it necessitates a certain level of precaution that I don't think was required before. So I think that's why you see this kind of communication, because I agree. Nobody wants to turn this into a full-blown World War III. So they're doing everything they can to appease domestic bases, to look like they're being responsive to the threat, and avoiding this going to the next level, where there are mass casualty events, which is something that neither side's political leaders would benefit from.
I didn't get the point. You said that it seemed to be a managed attack. What were you trying to say, Hassan, again?
So usually, like for example, when attacks like this would happen, like there will be, like the next day there'll be a protest. Like Iranis will go and like locally make protests. People go crazy. There'll be an uproar within the local in the community.
So you mean that Iran is managing this on a low-key
No. What I'm saying is that the response to the people are even aware, and Joseph just explained, they're more aware that these things are more of managed. They're not like direct. Like it's not like a. Like
look, Israel announced that it told the U.S. and told Iran before the attack.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So
on the other hand, it is not correct that this was a show-off. There were actual attacks on actual important facilities. Mm-hmm. So just like the Iranian attack was a real thing on a real military airport, so there is a balance to strike between reality, that these were actual attacks that cause actual harm, and the fact that they are limited to military facilities, so the harm is limited. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's not trivialize it. There is a balance to
not trivializing, but there's a level of containment that they're doing to the public opinion. I feel in context that they're trying to limit the uproar of the public opinion.
Well, actually, as Joseph said, to begin with, they said we're operating normally, airport is open, everything's fine, it's normal. So the government framing is this way from the beginning, because they would like to absorb it, because Israel also is trying to absorb it. Both sides realize that it's not to their advantage to expand this.
I think that it's still a very fluid situation. As long as the conflict and the massacres continue in Lebanon and Gaza, there's not going to be any stable peace between any of these regional actors. And I think that we have to remember at the heart of all of this really is what's going on in Gaza. It really, in my assessment, once Israel is able to end this conflict in Gaza and pull out of Lebanon, that changes everything. But until that happens, I can't see any meaningful change in the current geopolitical arrangement. So it's really goes back to where it started.
I think we are now in a holding pattern, waiting for the results of U.S. elections. If U.S. elections comes with Harris, then this will tend towards a conclusion. If it comes with Trump, then Israel will try to gain a bit more than what they have already. but it would come to a conclusion. It might be uglier form, uglier shape, but I don't think anything fundamental is going to change.
I think we'll stop here.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Shabab.
All right.
Okay, thank you.